Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
With the recent fuel cost increases, it hurt in the driver's pocket.
Mr. Massé, seconded by Ms. Matheson, moved that Bill C-248, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act, Ojibwe National Park, or National Urban Park of Canada, be now read a second time.
Well, there were delays before the pandemic, and things weren't perfect before the pandemic. But what's happening now is the government has basically was unable to anticipate the return to air travel.
Thanks for joining us. High gas prices continue to soar, and they're hitting everyone hard, but especially those who make their living behind the wheel. Cab drivers assume the costs of fueling up, not the cab companies. And as Dale Molnar reports, some are now looking to the city to provide some relief.
The price of the gas is it's a lot for all the cab driver, all the fleet. So.
Cab drivers like Saleh Babakar are looking for relief. Under the current setup, drivers pay fees to the veteran cab company. Those can be as high as $665 a week in the winter. The cabbies negotiated those rates when nailing down a contract with Vets Cab last year. At the time, gas prices were about half what they are now. So the escalating gas prices are hitting them hard.
I spend like every day like over $30 for the small car. So
$30?
Yeah.
If you stop in a car and you have a short trip for a couple kilometers, basically you'll be losing money.
The drivers hope the city could help, so the union representing cabbies approached the city to see if administration could come up with some compensation for the drivers. It was told any request for a meter rate increase would need to come from the union and Vets Cab.
Meter rate increases are generally initiated by the industry. So it would be the responsibility of the industry to come forward with those costs, whether that's inflation, vehicle costs, fuel costs, bring that forward to us. And we use the taxi cab cost index to analyze that, look at what's most appropriate, possibly do some comparisons with other municipalities of our side, look at ridership, and determine whether it's an appropriate raise in the meter rate.
A cab index takes into account average costs for things like gas. The current meter rate is $3.80. It was last increased 7 years ago. Union President Emile Nabout says when the approach of Vets Cab to join the meter hike request, he says the company also wanted to hike the fees it charges the cabbies. The union is hoping to convince the Vets Cab company to approach the city with them for a meter rate increase, but insist any increases should go to the drivers. The last increase was 8%. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
There was another step in the process to create a national park for Windsor today. Parliament voted on a bill to create the Ojibwe National Urban Park. And our Chris Ensing has been following this and joins me now live in studio. So, Chris, what does this step mean?
Yeah, Katerina, this was the bill's second reading. It's passed, voted for in favor, and that means that a federal committee is going to look at how to create this park, start a consultation process. That's expected in the fall. And this all has to do with a group of parks between Windsor and LaSalle, including Ojibwe Park, Black Oak Heritage Park, Ojibwe Prairie Provincial Nature Park, as well as Ojibwe Shores and other green spaces and parks. This has been something that the area has wanted for years, primarily to keep some of Canada's most endangered species safe from development pressures and keep those green spaces alive. We know that this city has a low tree cover. The other big part of this is to fund infrastructure improvements around the included parks and those green spaces. I spoke with someone about how big this is for our area.
It's sort of where all these issues come together because it's Canada's ecological hotspot. We see the highest number of endangered species here. We've got the huge development pressure, very little land that's protected, and of course this tall grass prairie, which works as a natural sponge, slowly releasing water and absorbing water and helping with that flood mitigation or flood regulation in the city of Windsor. So for me, I look at this and see all of the different ways that it is going to contribute and continue to contribute for the people of Windsor, for the species that live in Windsor, the many endangered species that are living in and around this area.
If you're looking for an example of something that recently went through this process, Rouge Park in Toronto, it shows you what this can look like. They went through this when it was created years ago, Katerina.
And Chris, this vote was Isn't supported by everyone, though. So what's happening there?
That's right. This private member's bill was put forward in February by Windsor West NDP MP Brian Massey. He called this an important victory for those supporting the bill, what happened today. And now that includes the city of Windsor and Caldwell First Nation. They wrote letters asking all MPs to vote in favor of the bill. Almost all Liberal members voted against the bill today, and that includes Windsor-Tecumseh MP Eric Kramatorsk. I asked him why.
He and I, both of our hearts are in this process. We are passionate about seeing the creation of an Ojibwe National Urban Park. I believe that the process that is currently underway, that's being led by Parks Canada, is a true path to creating an Ojibwe National Urban Park, because it has from its start and at its heart consultations with Indigenous groups, with environmental groups, and with the local community. And so the path that we are on is going to get us to an Ojibwe National Urban Park. It may take a year, it might take a year and a half to get to that point, but we're going to get there.
Now, Kramatorsk says that Parks Canada process has already started, includes consultations that will take place across Canada. Brian Massey's office took issue with this, pointing out that the normal process requires a piece of legislation in order for this park to be created, like Massey's private member bill. Now, either way, this process is moving forward. Kramatorsk gave a timeline on the park through Parks Canada of about 2 years. Massey's private member bill puts consultations likely in the fall, could move through government early next year. And just a note here as well, Conservative MP for Essex, Chris Lewis, also voted in favor of Massey's bill today. Katarina?
Thanks for this, Chris. CBC's Chris Ensing live in studio for us tonight. The outdoor rink at Charles Clark Square is on thin ice. The city says it's in such poor condition it will no longer be able to operate as is. City Council will look at what to do with it at its upcoming meeting on Monday. According to city documents, since 2010, repairs and upgrades to the rink have cost taxpayers more than $300,000. Given the costly repairs, the Recreation Department is recommending that Council approve $300,000 in funding, money that would be used for a consultant to design a new outdoor rink at City Hall. Hospitals in Windsor, Essex are sticking with their mask mandates. They require visitors, patients, and staff to mask up. The move will run counter to the province. Its policy is set to expire on Saturday. It will then be up to individual hospitals to decide whether to keep masking rules in place. Windsor Regional Hospital, Hotel Dieu Grace, and Erie Shores Healthcare have all seen a downswing in COVID-19 levels, but say their decision to continue with the mask mandate takes into consideration their higher risk environments. The province will keep in place its mask mandate for long-term care and retirement homes. For those of you flying out of Toronto in the near future, Ottawa says it's working on a plan to alleviate the delays facing travelers at Pearson Airport. But according to one former airline industry insider, the problems may get much worse before things improve. Greg Ross has more.
This year, it's supposed to be 3 to 4 times bigger than they were in 2021.
Duncan Dee is the former chief operating officer at Air Canada. He says after being grounded by the pandemic for so long, people are itching to travel again this summer.
You've got Canadians who have been planning this particular holiday for 2 years.
If they're flying out of Pearson, they may need to prepare for long lineups getting through security. Some travelers we spoke to today were pre-warned about these issues by their airlines.
I got a message to arrive a lot earlier than normal.
Just the check-in notice from Air Canada said leave lots of time.
The government says they're beefing up the workforce to alleviate the problem.
We are adding additional CBSA officers. We're also adding additional CATSA officers.
They've hired 400 new airport security agents at Pearson who are expected to be trained and in place by the end of the month. But Dee says the government knew about the problem months ago and should have had them in place long before now.
When the government decides to put brand new rookie screeners on the screening lines at the start of the peak, it's a recipe for disaster.
Many international travelers flying into Pearson have experienced huge delays as well.
Customs was about 3 hours, got through, flight canceled from Toronto to Boston. All right, at this point, Now I go and I see there is a 400-person line.
Former NHLer turned podcaster Ryan Whitney took to social media to complain about the issues he had connecting through Pearson last week. Dee says these issues are largely due to COVID protocols in place at customs.
What happens to an international traveler? They get to the officer, they've got to provide them with their vaccination certificate, they've got to provide them with their ArriveCAN QR code, and they have to determine whether or not they'd be selected for random testing.
Dee says screening at customs now takes on average 4 times longer than it did pre-pandemic. The Minister of Transportation says they're working to ease some of these delays.
International travelers who have a connecting flight now are no longer eligible for random testing.
Leaders at the Summit of the Americas have begun work in Los Angeles. During his opening remarks, the U.S. Secretary of State laid out the key issues that will be discussed, including health security, clean energy, and advancing democracy.
Much like the problems, the solutions are interconnected. And to be effective, they have to reach across borders. That's why we're here. That's really what it comes down to.
The Canadian delegation is expected to focus on climate change, gender equality, better economic integration, and trade. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got to work on the climate change agenda today. He met with the Prime Minister of Barbados. The host of the summit, U.S. President Joe Biden, made his way to Los Angeles this afternoon. The federal government has named a person to work as a go-between for Indigenous communities and Ottawa. Kimberly Murray is the former executive director of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She will act on behalf of communities dealing with the discovery of unmarked graves at former residential school sites.
I look forward to meeting with you, coming to your communities, and hearing from leadership and survivors about the challenges communities continue to face in their tireless efforts of recovery, repatriation, protection, and commemoration. I am ready to hear about the unique barriers your communities have had and continue to have while doing this sacred work.
A key part of Murray's work will be recommending ways to strengthen federal laws and practices to preserve and protect burial sites. Murray says she will also work to dismantle colonial laws that obstruct Indigenous efforts to commemorate those who were victims of the residential school system. More and more shoppers are turning to buy now, pay later plans to afford their purchases. Tech giants like Apple have even announced their own payment programs. But some personal finance experts say these types of installment loans can put consumers in a tight spot. Nisha Patel explains.
So I may or may not have spent a little bit too much money on Shein, but I used Afterpay, so it's fine, right?
It's all over TikTok, shoppers boasting how much they've bought, spending little up front.
They don't necessarily have the financial muscle to buy the goods that are being offered.
So they turn to buy now, pay later services like Klarna, getting the goods now, but paying in installments over weeks or months. Afterpay, PayBright, and Sezzle are other big players. Now Apple is the latest to dive in with Apple Pay Later in the U.S., though no word just yet on when it might come to Canada.
You can now get that espresso machine you've wanted and pay for it over time with no additional cost.
While the loans aren't new, they've surged in popularity as more consumers shop online for just about anything you can click on.
It is going to become a lot more ubiquitous than it is today.
The companies make money by charging fees to the retailers, and many have no interest or late fees to consumers if you make the payments on time. Experts say buy now, pay later can seem better than credit cards, but they can also create bad financial habits, especially for younger shoppers.
When you pay with anything other than cash, you spend more because it doesn't feel like your money.
Julia Drybrow bought these Doc Marten shoes using buy now, pay later services.
When I, see that big extra, that big ticket item, and then I realize, I can do 6 payments of $14. That sounds so much easier.
Drybrow says she feels she can control her purchases, but agrees those who are less financially savvy might overspend.
I could absolutely see how it could, add up over time and become quite detrimental to someone's finances.
For big purchases, save for them. That's the discipline that you want to develop over time.
so that pay later doesn't cause pain later. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
As Russian forces tighten their grip on the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine, hectic evacuation efforts are underway. Buses are streaming west, away from the intense fighting and continuous bombardment. And extraordinary efforts are being made to make sure the most vulnerable get to safety. CBC's Margaret Evans has the story.
Give me your tired and your poor. Young volunteers navigating the streets of Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine. Here to help those too fragile to escape the war closing in all around them on their own. Lydia Boyko is 83, a nephew and his wife unable, they say, to care for her as she needs. It all feels a bit rough and tumble, but she holds her dignity. This isn't how goodbyes should be. Alla Lisitska is 80, like Boyko, traveling alone, one friend to see her off. I feel horrible, she says. I haven't left my apartment in 7 years, and the social workers have been taking care of me all that time. Social workers like Natalia work with the aid group East SOS to identify those who are ready to leave. The main argument is whether they're ready to stay without water and electricity. If the shelling gets worse, we ask them, and we can't come to help, are they ready to face that on their own? 3/4 of the city's residents have already left, the so-called Kramatorsk Salient, flanked by Russian troops on 3 sides.
Kramatorsk became the de facto capital of the region after pro-Russian separatists took over Donetsk in 2014. In fact, they also took over Kramatorsk for a time. Now its fate hangs in the balance again. The city was a major rail hub for those fleeing fighting in the east until April 8th, when a missile slammed into the station, killing more than 50 people. The only way out now is by road. The SOS passengers headed for the town of Pokrovsk, 60 kilometers to the southwest, where an evacuation train is waiting. The driver, Edward Skorik, volunteers because his own parents were helped in the same way. It's dangerous work, he says, but I feel it's my duty. Emergency workers are on hand to help with the boarding, more rough and tumble, until they're settled on board. They know only that they're heading west and that volunteers will be waiting on the other end. I'm not afraid of death, says Boyko, but the despair, hearing how they shoot, hearing how children cry, this is a terrible thing. And so the train pulls out, carrying its passengers, some full of hope and some who've lost it. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kramatorsk.
A live look at what's going on outside there. We do have showers on the way yet again. Dali Ashry will have more right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Low water levels along the Detroit River are causing some canals on Pesh Island to disappear. The changes are seen by some as a detriment, especially for people who want to kayak or canoe in the area. Tim Burney with the Essex Region Conservation Authority says the lack of water flow could have negative impact on amphibians, frogs, turtles, and other species. But Burney adds it's a natural occurrence. He said water levels are lower than they have been the past few years and would need to go up to restore the flow on Pesh. And Dahlia Ashtree is here now for a look at our weather forecast. Dahlia, it looks like we're just in and out of that rain today, a little bit drier, but tomorrow more on the way, I think.
Exactly. So have your umbrella ready. It must have been a dry commute to work for you today, but tomorrow it's not going to be that, unfortunately. The normal high this time of year is 25 degrees, and Windsor sitting just a bit below that today. 22 degrees the normal low, 14 degrees, 12 degrees for today's low. The current temperature right now in Windsor is 18 degrees, Kitchener 19, Sarnia a bit on the cooler side, 16 degrees. Yesterday was humid, so we saw a little bit of those warmer temperatures. Now, as you can see here from Detroit, Michigan area, we're seeing the precipitation starting to peek through. Hopefully, it helps with those water levels a little bit that we just heard about in Detroit. It's starting to peek through into Windsor. You're starting to see those wet conditions coming in. 6 p.m. Today, around this time is when you'll see that rain starting to peek through a little bit. As you head into tomorrow morning, that's when you'll have your wet commute, starting to see those clouds and that chance of showers starting to peek through again. Friday as well, that's when you see the rain again continues. But I have some good news for you as you head into Saturday, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, the rainfall is going to be falling down a little heavy in areas like Leamington, 14 millimeters of water there. Windsor, 7 millimeters of water. Thursday starts to pick up just a bit, 9 millimeters of water accumulating there. And that will stay the same consistently in Windsor until Friday, 7 a.m. Overnight tonight in Windsor and Leamington and Chatham-Kent, there is a risk of thunderstorm tonight and just 40% chance of showers in Sarnia and London. A look at your 5-day forecast like we talked about. Tomorrow, that chance of rain. Same thing on Friday, 24 degrees as a high and 30% chance of rain, 13 low. Saturday, you get that break. The flowers get to bloom, 24 degrees. Go out and enjoy it. Sunday, rainfall again. Monday, 27 degrees, starting to feel a little like summer again with those warmer conditions.
Thanks so much for that, Dahlia.
Thanks, Katarina.
When we come back, we'll tell you about garden bats. Stay with us. With the arrival of warmer weather, attention is shifting to outdoor spaces. Many people like to attract birds and other wildlife, but there's one animal that's probably not on the list. Bats. Bats are often misunderstood. However, as our CBC colleagues in Edmonton learned, bats are more useful than mysterious.
My name is Nikki Paskar, and I'm a conservation coordinator with the Edmonton and Area Land Trust. Bats are beneficial in so many ways. So not only do they add biodiversity to the local ecosystem, but they also play an incredibly important ecological role. And especially for us, they do a lot of insect control. They control a lot of mosquito populations, as well as a lot of different insects that impact crops. In terms of making your property friendlier for bats, one of the biggest things that you can do is leave mature native deciduous trees up or plant new native deciduous trees. They like kind of the cracks and the crevices. They like old woodpecker holes, peeling bark, especially in those older trees. Bats also like to be close to both natural vegetation and a source of water. They're probably not going to come if there's hustle and bustle, kids running around, dogs there, if the bat box is right near like a barbecue or a fire pit. So if you're worried about bat conservation and you're wanting to actively support bat populations, we're really looking for about 3 to 4 chambers in kind of a traditional style bat box. Bats use bat boxes when they're here in the warmer months, so they'll kind of emerge from hibernation or from migrating and arrive here April, May-ish, but they can use the boxes to roost when they're not foraging. So kind of just like a resting spot, a place to raise their pups, things like that. So this is an example of our 4-chambered maternity box. We can have upwards of 300 in a maternity box like this. You can do it yourself if you have some woodworking experience, or if you know someone who has some woodworking experience. We have the blueprints on our website. So about 4 hours in total for a bat box. Bats do everything they can to stay away from humans. They are not going to fly into your hair. They really just want to be left alone, or they really are not very dangerous for people.
And that is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. And of course, we are also on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching and have a great night.